Hello there. Very good evening and welcome to Let's Talk Politics. I'm your host, Layne, and of course, this program, as we always say, is dedicated to addressing the current political issues in our country and, of course, development taking place under the People's Progressive Party civic government. This evening, I have the honor to welcome on the program the Minister of Home Affairs, the Honorable Robeson Benn, as well as my usual guest, the Honorable Member of Parliament, Sanjeev Datadin. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you this evening.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Minister. And Ed, it's always a pleasure to be here, and good evening to all your viewers and listeners.
I want to get right into tonight's discussion because we on Thursday we had a similar discussion where we addressed some issues regarding a decision taken by the government of Guyana, which is rooted in one, our obligations on the international treaties, our respect for the rule of law, and our sovereignty as a nation. And that has to do with a decision taken to reinstitute the visa requirement for the entry of some CARICOM nationals. I'll ask the Honorable Robeson Benn, the Minister of Home Affairs, to put this into context. But I just want to, before I ask him to come in, is to make the point that the decision taken by the government of Guyana is not a decision that is unique to Guyana as a country, but many CARICOM countries, many Caribbean countries took similar decisions, and I think 13 of them, if my numbers are correct, took a similar decision where they have reinstituted visa requirement for some Caribbean nationals to enter their countries. But Honorable Minister Benn, I'll bring you in here so that you can maybe set the context of this discussion so that people have an understanding and an appreciation of the decisions taken by the government.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on your program. The difficulty that we have basically is that we have a situation of people smuggling and trafficking in persons. And Guyana has been, particularly over the last 5, 7 years, been a major transit point for persons coming from other countries and passing through, uh, going into neighboring countries, and perhaps winding up finally on the US Mexican border. The difficulty that we have is that there are large numbers. We've knocked the numbers down now at this point, but particularly there are issues of trafficking in persons. You may be aware that we are in a tier ranking system with respect to the United States government on the question of trafficking in persons. We did arrive at tier 1 status, I think, in 2019. We ran the review with 2020. We've made the point about the COVID pandemic and it affecting our ability to manage the entire issue of trafficking in persons. We pointed out to about the flood of Venezuelan migrants who are departed in that country, given the crisis in that country. But particularly, we have been pointing out to a situation where we've had people coming, some from Cuba, but particularly two from Haiti in large numbers, and arriving, giving fictitious addresses, being marshaled and shepherded and moved around by certain coyotes, I would call them. I think that's the term in the trafficking and smuggling area. And they're hitting the trail up to Corpacari, across Essequibo to Letem, and finding their way into Brazil. The difficulty that we have associated with this problem is that, one, there is the ethical and moral issues with respect to what these people find themselves in, either as people being trafficked or smuggled. And I would point out that quite a number of the Haitians are young females and even young children. They are exploited along the way for the labor, for the money. Sometimes they're abandoned. They're breaching our borders. When all the borders are closed, the land borders are closed, so there's no way that they should be allowed to come into the country and depart illegally. And also, we have the problem of the corruption of the system. There's a pervasive corruption and attempts to corrupt the entire system in respect of immigration, the policing outposts, the administration personnel they may meet along the way, enabled, of course, by some Guyanese persons. And so there's an entire corruption along the line of our officials in many instances. And then we're entering, if we go over on the Brazilian side, they're having the same problem. Now, there was no visa requirement originally with respect to Haitians going to Brazil. After the Brazilians had given humanitarian and military assistance when they had their problems in Haiti. But the borders are closed. And it is the Brazilians who are also complaining that they're having the similar problems. The trafficking, the corruption going through, the breaching of their borders, the health threats and risks that the problem brings now in terms of the COVID pandemic, they are complaining too. So it is not simply, if I would put it in context, some people, of course, have said that there's a discriminatory policy in respect of Haitians. I have heard being said, perhaps in some news programs in the Caribbean, that this is a case that Guyana is taking a racial position in this matter. But some of these programs are emanating from countries where they have taken the same position, that there should be a visa applied for before arrival in the country. I would hasten to say that still Guyana does not have a critical mass of people to develop our country. We are not against, I believe, in terms of the government's policy, in terms of people coming to our country and settling here and working with us and developing the country with us. We have issues with our skill sets and availability of our skills. Not all our diaspora skills are coming back. We're having some coming back from Trinidad and Barbados now. But we want people to come here and work with us to help develop the country, to regenerate, reinvigorate our cultural and ethnic mix. But we cannot be doing, having people coming to the country, leaving almost immediately, and creating problems in terms of the administration, law and order, creating issues in communities in some cases, which changes the character and the engagement in the communities as they go through. So I think fundamentally that is the issue. We have a trafficking in persons unit. We are now establishing the other leg to that, which is a unit in respect of people smuggling particularly. We have to strengthen legislation with respect to this issue to properly cover how we handle the issue of people smuggling itself. But the two issues are conflated. And we are aware that issues of people trafficking and smuggling also have associations with persons who are involved in drug dealing, drug smuggling, gun smuggling, and all those other issues, money laundering. All of those other issues are wrapped up in one if you look at it holistically. So we have to take the responsible position as a country to deal with this matter. We cannot ethically and morally be involved in the trafficking and smuggling of people in the 21st century. And of any race, we cannot be involved in it and the levels to which it is happening. And so that is why we have taken the responsible position. We have signed up the international agreements with the International Organization on Migration. We have signed up with agreements with the United Nations Commission on Human Relations, UNHCR actually. And I've had regular meetings with them recently where we laid out our position. And I think that they understand that we're taking the responsible position on this matter.
Minister, you touched on a couple of very, very important points, which I would want us to come back to a little later. But I probably want to bring in Sanjeev here from a legal perspective, maybe for you to weigh in, Sanjeev, on this. But importantly, Minister, and we have to deal with at some point in this program the issue of where the decision taken by the government of Guyana, first, is not one that is unique to Guyana, and two, the fact that politically, deliberately rather, the political opposition is making this out to be an issue of ethnicity, completely ignoring the fact that the Cubans are captured in this same thing, and that at least 13 CARICOM countries, just about three countries now allow Haitians, for example, to travel without visas. So there are a number of issues. I think the matter by itself is being used as a political football by the opposition. I mean, with very little success, because one has to look at the merits of what is happening, and the fact that you mentioned in your comments just now that this was a very consultative process involving international organizations, involving CARICOM countries involved. In this instance, Haiti. There was some discussions with Haiti. There were discussions with the Brazilians and so forth. So it is not a situation where the government of Guyana got up one morning and decided they are going to stop patients from coming here, because the numbers are there too to speak to the situation, which we will get to. But I'll bring you in here, Sanjeev, before I come back to Minister.
Ed, you see, the position is it really it comes down to an issue of where they perceive or where they have or where they allow access to persons. When I say perceive, I mean a lot of countries, for various reasons, have restricted access to their borders. Guyana has traditionally been very welcoming in allowing persons in to our borders, but it's been taken advantage of. Because we're accommodating, we are now one of the few places that Cubans and Haitians can access visas without a visa. But they're not our intention of doing that, of and every country in that context, your intention of allowing visa free travel to your country is to welcome those people to come to your country, and as Minister Ben pointed out, to help in the development, to work, to engage even to visit or tourism. That's what it's intended to do. When you establish visa-free travel to your countries, to allow people to come and experience your country better. But what has happened is the perceived ease that exists when there is no visa required is real, because you don't have to give an explanation and you claim to be able to come to the country to visit or to work or to explore or to do business. You're allowed to do this. But this is not what is happening. It has been going on for a few years. It has been in the media for a few years, and it is well documented publicly that we have a lot of persons coming into the country from Haiti, but we don't have evidence of them exiting Guyana. the perception at one time is they're all is still in Guyana somewhere. But we have now learned, and the minister has just said that they're ending up on the United States Mexico border. They're ending up in the our neighbors in Brazil, in Suriname. They're ending up in French Guiana. They're moving on, but they're not doing so legitimately. And we, as far as we're concerned, we would welcome persons who come to Guyana to visit or to engage or to work. Um, that is why we have visa free travel. But it's being abused, for want of a better word, it's being used on a scale for a purpose that is sinister. And we can't sit by and allow that to happen. You know, the old adage is your kindness shouldn't be your weakness. We are welcoming of persons, but then we have to also account. We have to account to our neighbors. We have to account to our position in the world, in the geopolitical system. We can't allow that this would continue. We have social and moral obligations. Trafficking in persons, I know the perceptions people have. Well, who is it harming? What are you doing? But you should not allow or condone that sort of behavior, because, as the minister has quite rightly pointed out, the great association with that is with larger criminal enterprise of various kinds. The traditionally, that has been what is happening. So, Ed, if we go through the process simply to say, or if we look at the process simply to say, well, Guyana's decided that Haitians need visa, that doesn't give you a true perspective of exactly what is going on. Haitians and Cubans were allowed in Guyana before without visas. We were welcoming. They were welcome to come to Guyana, to settle, to find jobs if they can find jobs, and to better themselves if they felt they could do that here. But this is not why they're coming to Guyana. This is not what they are using their access to Guyana for. They are using it as a gateway, as a stepping stone to a further objective. Now, we have got to be kind, we have got to be fair to our neighbors too. We can't do this when it affects them because people are going illegally into Brazil and Suriname. We can't just ignore it. Suriname and Brazil would be well entitled to say to Guyana, well, listen, what are you doing? And why are you allowing this to happen? So we have to be accountable. We don't exist. Guyana doesn't exist in the world by itself. We have to be accountable. Now, if it is that persons want to come to Guyana to work, to better themselves, to live, and they feel that Guyana is a place that they would wish to settle and do, then they could have done that. But if you that is what you want, a visa shouldn't be a problem. All that would be required is you would have to upfront indicate what is your position, where you're going to be. The visa process means that we would be able to obtain more information. A visa doesn't mean that you are not allowing Haitians to come. It just means that we are hoping that what we would be able to do is we would be able to welcome those who want to come to Guyana for the purposes of being in Guyana and participating in the development of Guyana, but not to those who want to use Guyana as a gateway and as a stepping stone to further things and to be part of or to create a larger criminal enterprise for which Guyana is unwittingly a participant. We can't allow that to happen. So you see, when you take it, the only thing of being awarded a visa, or Guyana has simply said, we need visas for Haitians. That's not the whole story. If Haitians were coming to Guyana, and we would have records of them entering and leaving, even in large numbers, there would be no problem. But it is clear that they are coming to Guyana to go further afield, to pursue other things, to travel across borders illegally. Now, you hear the argument: who does it hurt? Why should Guyana care? Guyana should care because we belong in the world with the other countries of the world, and we should not condone or participate breaking laws. The movement, if the Haitians, if, as is reported widely, and it has been for more than a year reported widely, if we have 1,000 Haitians coming to Guyana at the airport, and we only can record 10 leaving Guyana, then there's a lot to be accounted for. The assumption would be that they are in Guyana, but we are discovering they are not, which means they have left Guyana illegally, whether to Brazil or to Suriname or to elsewhere. Now, Guyana can't participate and be that. If they wanted to leave to a neighboring country, and if they were doing so legally, so we can show lawful exit, lawful entry, lawful exit, it would be a different situation, Ed. But what we are hearing under the guise, the typical guise of race and such negative attacks that are being made, or connotations and implications are being put upon, is no one is saying, and no one is addressing that visas don't mean that you can't enter Guyana. It just means we could do a little bit more checking to ensure that you're coming to Guyana to be in Guyana, to participate in our development, or simply to visit. You're not coming to Guyana to use it as a stepping stone to some wider enterprise that is repugnant to comity of nations and may even be criminal. So we can't ignore that fact. We have to address it. It is understand this does not mean that Haitians are stopped from coming to Guyana. This just means that we want to be in a position to ascertain or to be more secure in our allowing persons in who are in keeping with what we would like and what our wishes are about coming to Guyana.
No, Sanjeev, you touched on a couple of important points there. I wanted to bring back Minister Ben in just a bit. But I'm going to go back to what Felix, the then Minister of Immigration, I think it was, what Minister of Citizenship, they call it, said when he reported to the Parliamentary Committee on Foreign Affairs. He presented figures that shows clearly that in 2018, for example, 1,238 Haitians arrived in Guyana, but there is only evidence that 85 of them departed. You're talking about 1,100 plus cannot be accounted for. Likewise, in 2018, it showed that, and that is as of April 30th, 2018, it showed that 22,520 Cubans arrived in Guyana, but only 16,350 departed. In the same article, Felix went on to say, and this is a Starbuck News article I'm quoting. It says Felix last week said that from his understanding, Haitians who arrived in Guyana, this is in 2019 he made this statement, are being guided by their fellow countrymen. And this is a direct quote from the gentleman. It says, if the people land and those who are here organized to move them from one point to another, is that smuggling. So Mr. Felix simply was saying, if the people come here and they disappear and they cross the borders illegally, or wherever they go, or if they remain in Guyana illegally, it's okay. But I wonder, before I bring you in back, Minister Ben, I want to quote figures, recent figures that were released, which shows that between 2015 and June 2021, 42,100 Haitians came to Guyana, with some 38,187 of them being unaccounted for. So just 3,913, there is evidence of them leaving the country. Out of 42,000, just 3,913. Isn't that a cause for concern for any government? Where exactly 38,000 people disappeared to? Felix and the PNC at that time in power saw no need to be alarmed about this. And we're going to talk about what we believe is really happening, because one bus driver who was moving the Haitians, came forward when his name ended up on a court document, came forward and he declared that he had nothing to do with it, and he practically walked us through what was happening, picking up the people at the airport, bringing them to the hotel, then taking them to other places. And of course, those issues that the Attorney General spoke about on Thursday, about evidence of people being locked in hotel rooms and so forth without their documents and don't know where they are going. So clearly, Minister, um, we're seeing the evidence before us.
Yes, we we are aware even now that buses are being loaded to go up the road to the interior, to the Latham area, as we speak. One thing I would like to point out from your statistics alone, well, they were our statistics and we released the figures. 90% of the Haitians could not be accounted for. They're not in Guyana. We know they're not in Guyana. We know there are a few places where Haitians are. I met with the Haitian committee or association here a few days ago, and we had quite a useful discussion. Uh, I would also like to point out that there doesn't seem to be much noise about the fact that we require Chinese and Indians and Pakistanis and others from other parts of the world to apply for a visa from their country of origin before they arrive in Guyana. They have to apply in China for a visa to come to Guyana before they come here. Similarly for Indians and others. So uh, the outcry seems to be fairly selective in this matter. Uh, I would also point out that we have been paying attention during the elections impasse and before the elections impasse on our side as the PPP Civic, particularly from HT2, who came through to the country during that period. I think 19,000 in 1 year alone, if I'm somewhere around those figures. Or sorry, in 2019, maybe 17,000 people. I've got to check those figures again momentarily. But the largest amount of people coming through from that country came through in 2019 and 2020. So there was a lot of unhappiness about what it perhaps connotated at that time, with good reason. Uh, but the fundamentals remain the same. The persons are being trafficked and they're being smuggled. And we are have to pay attention to this problem. We had a problem early in the year where there was said to be a caravan of Cubans and others who were waiting to cross the Suriname border to come into our country and to move on at the time of the installation of the new government or just thereafter in the United States of America, the Biden administration. There was a thought that there will be a new opening up uh, now that the Trump administration had gone and that the Biden administration was in. And I noted that the Vice President of the United States, Ms. Kamala Harris, just visited the border and was encouraging people to stay in their countries to develop those countries, but that they recognized that there was a problem at the US Mexican border. We are aware, and anyone can go on YouTube and see what is happening in the mountains of the Isthmus of Panama. People are dying there, including Haitians, and being buried there at the sides of the trails as people are taking them, smuggling them through into along the way to the U.S. border. So the fundamentals are there. If we allow people to continue to come through in this way, we would be participating in what is clearly an illegal criminal activity, allowing people into slavery, allowing people into degrading and inhuman conditions. I don't want to be in that position as the Minister of Home Affairs, and certainly not in a PPPC government, and certainly not in the 21st century. And we are aware of what is happening with people who are leaving Africa itself on the west coast and trying to get to Europe. And we've seen boats, a couple of boats have passed by. There was an outcry when we had a boat passing by with dead bodies in it. People would make tremendous efforts to get into other countries where life is better and conditions and economic progress is better for the individual. But we have a responsibility as a government and as a state to make sure that we maintain law and order, that the people who rely on to maintain law and order have the requisite integrity to so do, and that the entire system is not corrupted, and that we do not create conditions of distress and animosity and for retribution or attacks with neighboring countries. So I think, of course, we don't want to be. It's unfortunate that we're debating this issue in this way and that it's become a kind of political football. It is not a political football. The actions we're taking are warranted in law, warranted in international agreements, and warranted from the ethical and moral perspectives.
And interesting there, Minister. I wanted to run this list quickly before I bring you in back, Sanjeev. So I'm looking at the number of countries where visas are required because I want to make a point for Haitians to travel to. So you have, for example, Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, and these are CARICOM countries I'm talking about, or Caribbean countries, and of course Brazil, which is not part of CARICOM but is in close proximity. Um, and as we go down here, I am seeing Cuba, I am seeing Dominica, I am seeing, and I'm trying to run this as quickly as possible. Majority of the African countries, of course, they required visas. Grenada, of course, Guyana. Um, I'm trying to get through Jamaica, and these are some of the countries I'm just picking up as I run through this list here. And the point I am making, are we saying that the Jamaicans, when they required visa for Haitians, they are racist? Are we saying that the Belizeans, when they required visas for Cubans, for Haitians, are we saying that they're racist? Are we saying that the Dominican government is a racist government and it doesn't want people of African descent into their country? Are we saying that all these countries that took the decision, including the African countries, the many African states, Nigeria, Niger, and I went through a whole list of them, Papua New Guinea, and I can go on here, where the list, Rwanda, well, Rwanda is it's opening in Rwanda, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Kitts Nevis, and Senegal. All these countries are requiring visa for Haitians to travel. Are we saying, and I deliberately name those countries because most of those countries that I mentioned there are predominantly Africans or people of African ancestry, including the African countries that I listed. So to hear the hollow argument that is coming from the opposition that somehow the Guyana government is being a racist government and don't want people of African descent into the country. But we know the role that many people, well, the information was there. And it's not by incident people like Felix and the others downplayed the whole issue when it came up in 2019. You spoke about it, Minister Ben. Um, and when we raised issues, when he reported to the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament, they tried to downplay the issue. They tried to downplay the issue. And but when you look at the evidence before you, you're seeing dozens of countries that has predominantly African and people of African ancestry that are also requiring visa. The issue is with visa, no one in the government of Guyana said to anybody that, look, we don't want Haitians to come here anymore. That's not the statement that was made by His Excellency or the Minister of Home Affairs or the Attorney General or the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The position is that we have to have a system and we have to be able to account for people. People are entering our country. We must be able to account for them in the first instance. And secondly, we must have a system where there are checks and balances, where you have to provide us with adequate information like any other country. And Minister Ben, I'm happy you made the point that this selectiveness with the opposition, especially about Haitians, and totally ignoring that you have so many other people who require visa to come here, including the Chinese, including the people from India, including the Bangladeshis, including so many other people that they talk about. But they're not seeing that. Selectively, because of their racist agenda, they want to single out Haitians. They want to single out Haitians. Nobody stopped Haitians from applying for a visa. Once you can justify your reason for coming to the country, I'm sure the system will allow visas to be issued. I'm going to bring you in here, Sanjeev, before I come back to Minister Ben.
And you see, it's a fact. Migration of persons are mainly for economic reasons. That's an established and well known fact. It is also true that countries that are perceived to be the poorer countries and the poorer nations usually have the most restrictions on their citizens traveling. And that is because, for economic reasons, those citizens would want to leave the country. Um, they, it's a historical fact that in the 1980s, when Guyana was in dire straits, that lots of Guyanese left to the United States, perhaps illegally, to Venezuela, to Suriname. Everybody went wherever they could have uh, gotten an opportunity at a better life. So in poor countries and in countries that are in difficult straits, you would usually find that the citizens of those countries are subject to the most restrictions. In fact, Guyana still requires a visa to go to many places. So, and that's a part of our legacy, of our history. But you see, what has been happening and what is happening as it relates to the Haitians, it is not that the Haitians are coming to Guyana, remaining in Guyana, and becoming a part of our economy and our country. That's not what's happening. The figures that the Ministry of Home Affairs, that Minister Ben released, demonstrates that more than 90% cannot be accounted for. So Guyana is quote unquote a transshipment point. Now, in the US, in Venezuela, when Guyanese were trying to, for economic reasons, leaving the country and trying to find or to be able to look after themselves and their families during the dire straits of the 1980s, there was no transshipment exactly going on. There were Guyanese were trying to get to the United States, to Canada. A lot went to Venezuela and Suriname. But basically, what happened is you went there and then you overstayed in many cases, and you became an illegal alien, and until you got regularized. That was the common experience of what was happening. But you see, what's happening now, it is entirely different. We have no problems with allowing Haitians to come to Guyana. We have no problem if what they're coming to Guyana to do is either to visit the country uh, as a tourist, uh, as a business visitor, or if they would need, if they can and want to find a job. That's an entirely different thing than it being a stepping stone, a gateway to somewhere else. Now, the Committee of Nations, which we have to, which the minister again alluded to, we can't behave in such an irresponsible manner, and we can't condone criminal activity. Now, we would want to go and say that, well, it's something to do with race. The reality is, Haiti requires a visa to go nearly everywhere because Haiti has been a poor country of desperate circumstances, and people will do anything they can, it appears, to leave. Now, that's a different question, but they're not coming to Guyana for Guyana to be the safe harbor. They are, in fact, using Guyana and making Guyana part of a criminal enterprise because we're breaking the laws, and people are traveling out of the country illegally. There would then be quote unquote cartels that would be involved in this. The whole chain is done and arranged whereby they're brought into the country, they're put up at fixed places, they're then transported to another place. But you see, when they leave Haiti, they usually, how this works is they're promised one thing, but on the journey they discover other things. They are at that stage, their desperation, which would have caused them to embark upon this process, would render them so vulnerable to abuse that they would then have left their country. They're in the middle of nowhere, quote unquote. They're in a country where they probably can't speak English. They would then be taken through countries where Spanish and Dutch are spoken, and Portuguese, again, languages they might not be familiar with. And they are very vulnerable. They wouldn't have money, they wouldn't have funds, they would be dependent on persons. But as as the minister pointed out, there are videos on YouTube that are so disturbing that I have never completely looked from at one. I've looked at a few seconds, and I don't want to see any more, where people are dying along the way, and they're just buried. Their family wouldn't know where they are. No one knows where they are, whether they're alive or dead. But it's not that, yes, their desperation is driving them to do that, but not because of the desperation. You, as a country, Guyana should facilitate that, because people are making the decisions out of desperation. But under normal circumstances, they wouldn't make that decision. They wouldn't take that risk. They wouldn't put their lives and the lives of their children at risk. But it's what's promised to them by the coyotes, who tell them that we will transport you to in this grand scheme. And then they're in the middle of it. What do they do? And they're vulnerable, and they should be protected even from themselves. And that's what this will do. Now, to come to Guyana, you're Haitian and you require a visa. There are Haitians who are in Guyana doing business, and there are Haitians who are businessmen. Then they would have no difficulty, none whatsoever. But if they cannot give an account as to why they're going to be here and what they're going to be doing in Guyana, then that's where the problems will arise. And Guyana has an obligation to not allow the tentacles of crime and organized crime to grow on the basis of this. And anyone who says it's a race issue has no idea of Guyana's immigration architecture. The first two groups, which were noticeably required visas to come to Guyana, were the Indians and the Chinese. And the reasons for that were they were identical. Guyana was perceived to be a point where it was a transit point. And again, because we would welcome people into Guyana, they had to get to Guyana and then they would have access to North America. And they would come literally from around the world. We saw in the newspapers that people are flying from Cuba, they're coming to Guyana, and they're flying all the way across the world, all over to be able to get here. And then they would embark upon their journey through Central America. This is a global problem. This is a bigger problem than simply Guyana. But Guyana must do its part to bring this sort of thing to an end. And the only way to do it, I mean, Chinese are required to get visas to come to Guyana. Nobody's complaining about that. That's been for a very long time. And India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they require visas to come to Guyana, and that has been so for a very, very long time too. And nobody's complaining that that's racial. But the reality is, this is not a restriction on travel to Haitians. It is simply to bring a situation that should never have been allowed in the 2018, 19, 20 period. It should have never been allowed to grow roots the way it did, because if you look year by year, the numbers go up drastically. So it should have never been allowed to gain root, but now it has to be dealt with. And as the minister has pointed out, we can't have Guyana be considered co-conspirators in a criminal enterprise. We can't allow that.
Thanks, Sanjeev. We're almost out of time. I'm going to give Minister Ben the chance to close the program in just a bit, but I want to reiterate something that you said, Sanjeev, and I think people need to recognize this. Recognize the fact that this is not a ban on Haitians or Cubans coming here. It's simply a, a measure to ensure that there is accountability, there is sufficient reasons provided by persons why they're going to come here, whether it be Haitians, whether it be Cubans. But most importantly, it is a measure that is going to put a dent on a multi-million dollar criminal enterprise that is smuggling people all across, maybe the Caribbean, maybe South America, and even around the world. So it is really, if you look at it in retrospect, it's a measure to really attack and to tackle a criminal enterprise. It has nothing to do with Haitians. If you're coming here legally, you're coming here legitimately, for good reasons, then you go through the process. You get yourself a visa, you apply, you get yourself a visa, and you come into the country, and you go about your business. When your time is up to leave, you leave. But 42,000 people can't come to the country, and you can't account for 38,000. Then, as a country, any responsible government will have to take action to ensure that they can account. You cannot, if you don't, then you are an accomplice. You're an accomplice in a major criminal network. Minister Ben, I'll give you a chance to wrap the program up with your closing comments.
Well, just to say quickly, I think one of the problems we have in terms of the media on this issue is a lack of journalistic integrity in terms of fair reporting of the issue, in terms of saying some of the things which we didn't have to come here to actually say. It is known out there. And so this jumping on this racist bandwagon is, again, an example of the poor quality of journalism, the poor service journalism is provided to our people on critical issues. One of the unfortunate things, of course, is that it's making Haiti, which has had a heroic but um, a difficult history, um, a victim again in terms of the discourse. But I would also say that some of the countries which have refused to allow Haitians to come without visas are African francophone countries. So a long period, a failure in proper law and order practices. And this is one of the failing in law and order practice. This allowing of this immigration uh, flood, corrupting the entire system, corrupting our officials, and of course wanting perhaps to continue Guyana to come along the path of being a failed state. We had a situation during the referendum, the theft, the attempts to theft our democracy, which pointed us all along the ways of becoming uh, identified completely as a failed state. The fact that we have been able to have a democratic renewal points us along the way to putting things right, to having proper resorts and avenues for people to come to the country, to develop our country, and to be able to hold our head up proudly in the Committee of Nations and in the Caribbean to say that we are also doing the right thing, that we're also doing the right thing in respect of the Venezuelan migrants. If the situation devolves to the point in Haiti that other resorts are necessary, we will be prepared to do the right thing, but in the right way. But we cannot have a continued situation where these actions undermine the rule of law, puts our country at great risk in terms of its security with its neighbors, and in fact creates conditions for complete collapse in the country as a result of these illegal gangs, these coyotes and others who are in this game for nefarious purposes. Not only respect of the human beings who they are trafficking and smuggling in, but also in relation to the other things, the drug smuggling, the money laundering, the gun smuggling, and all those other things which we are very, very unhappy about. But we're continuing to work at that problem. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on the matter, and perhaps hope that I'll be invited again soon to join yourself
Certainly,
and Sanjay to talk about
certainly,
some of these
certainly,
things
Minister.
in ways and perhaps to support the journalistic persons in having a frank discourse about these issues and not be ranting and misinforming the population about these questions, which have important implications for the development of the country.
Minister
Yeah.
Ben, I want to thank you, and I want to say to you that I'm happy that you have requested that invitation. I'll make maximum use of that to have you
You
here.
will surely hear.
Sanjeev can tell
You
you,
will certainly hear
I don't
from
take light of
Ed,
open
Minister
invitations
Ben.
of that nature.
Ed, in closing, I will only do what we have been pushing at all the time. Please, 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 everybody listening, get vaccinated, get vaccinated, get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Vaccinations have slowed down a little bit. There were all the circus that went on about the Sputnik vaccine and the rest of it. That is all behind us. I think everyone is clear now. This is our best option. Do your best, not only for yourself, for your family, for your communities. Please, please, please get vaccinated. And good night to everyone. Minister, it's always a pleasure. And good
Thank you.
night. God be with you.
Yes. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Minister. Have a good rest of the evening, guys.